The center's history actually goes back way to the very late 70s, 1980. We actually started as a laboratory called the MGH NMR Center. This was back even before people called it MRI, because the underlying technology was nuclear magnetic resonance. That's what the NMR stands for. Way back in our early days as the NMR Center, we were one of the first two hospitals here in the United States to have nuclear magnetic resonance imaging, today's MRIs, and did some of the very early pioneering studies showing how MRI could see things in the brain. For example, the lesions in patients with MS or brain tumors that were just invisible to the technology at the time, CAT scans and the like. And so really, right from the start, we were able to see things in human diseases that really we just weren't able to see before. And of course, once we could see them, we could understand them, study their response to treatments, and then test how new treatments could actually improve the patients. Since that time, we've had a number of kind of firsts within the center. We were the first center to do magnetic resonance angiography. Angiography is the tool where radiologists look at the blood vessels to look for blockages in those blood vessels or other abnormalities. Previous to our work, to do an image of the blood vessels, you would actually have to put a catheter into a patient's artery and inject large quantities of a contrast media and then take x-ray pictures. My colleague Van Wedeen and I actually developed a technique to be able to image blood vessels in the body without any contrast agents and without any x-rays, just using magnetic resonance imaging. And this really started the whole field of non-invasive magnetic resonance imaging of the blood vessels, so-called MRA, magnetic resonance angiography. A few years after that, we began to explore how we could see flow not just in the big vessels, like you would do with MR angiography, but to actually look at flow through the smallest vessels, perfusion, how blood flow gets into tissues like the brain and the heart, through the capillaries, and to support the function of those. Those tools basically evolved and grew over time to allow us to image blood flow in settings like stroke and in patients with tumors, but it also then allowed us to image how the brain actually works, because there are changes in blood flow when our brains are active. When you're listening to the sound of my voice or looking at the screen, those parts of your brain involved in that actually increase their blood flow. And so the very tool that we originally developed to say, look at patients with stroke, which were blockages of blood flow, we could use to look for those parts of the brain that showed increased blood flow when your brain was working. And that development, which we now call functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, is one of the really kind of foremost discoveries and inventions that have come from the center, and of course is used by hospitals all over the world to study patients, say, prior to their surgical procedures, to understand where the normal functioning parts of the brain are, as well as the abnormal parts of the brain, but also used by cognitive scientists and neuroscientists just to study the basic mechanisms of how the brain works.